Hello, and thank you for joining us today and participating in this webinar on when do I really need to perform an EO requalification. My name is Paul Litley. I'm a consulting manager with Nelson Labs, and I will be your presenter today. One of the first questions that comes to mind after completing an ethylene oxide sterilization qualification is, when do I need to perform a requalification study and what will it entail? Maintaining the validated state of the sterilization cycle and ensuring the process consistently and continually delivers the desired sterility assurance level is of utmost importance. This presentation takes a comprehensive look at validation approach, the factors that determine when a requalification is necessary, and how the expectations in ISO 11135 have changed in the recent years. When discussing requalification of a process, we inherently ask why. Why do I need to requalify a process that I monitor and through defined and documented process controls? Validated processes are commonly evaluated and periodically requalified due to process drift. Drift in the process may be caused by several factors, including equipment wear, equipment specification changes, changes in raw materials, or even small inadvertent process changes that may add up over time. We requalify to ensure that the validated state is maintained, verifying process effectiveness, and identifying potential drift or out of specification conditions. With respect to sterilization, requalification serves for the purpose to demonstrate that the original sterilization validation remains valid and to ensure that any inadvertent process changes have not occurred since the last reduced requalification study. Performed annually, the assessment review changes control history, identify any changes to product, packaging, sterilization equipment, cycle, or environment that could potentially adversely affect the delivery of the desired sterility assurance level, and to determine if any requalifications are necessary. Additionally, the need for requalification be assessed whenever a significant change is made to the sterilization process or to the product. Today's presentation, we will cover the following aspects of initial validation, of regulatory background, initial validation, and annual requalification assessment. With regard to regulatory background, we'll focus on updates and changes to ISO 11135. We'll take a quick look at what is required in the initial validation of the sterilization process with regards to installation operational qualification, microbial performance qualification, physical performance qualification, and the chemical performance qualification, or EO residual verification. And the last topic, the heart of the discussion, we'll look actually at the annual requalification assessment. We'll look at the document rationale, reduce requalification activities, and when you will need to do or would need to perform a full requalification. With regards to regulatory background, the following standards are followed for this presentation. CFR Part 820 is the good manufacturing process for medical devices. ISO 11135 obviously is the sterilization of healthcare products for ethylene oxide. And then also we'll be using aspects from TIR 16, microbiological aspects of ethylene oxide sterilization. Per ISO 11135, requalification is defined as the repetition of part of a validation for the purpose of confirming the continued acceptability of a specific process. New to the standard is a clause in 12.3.3 which states that an IQ, OQ, or PQ and subsequent requalifications shall be reviewed annually to determine the extent of requalification that is necessary. And per the QSR, when changes or process deviations occur, the manufacturer shall review and evaluate the process and perform revalidation where appropriate. An example of regulatory scrutiny surrounding requalification of EO sterilization processes, we look at the following warning letter. In summary, this firm did not account for critical factors such as packaging configurations, nor did the firm have a loading configuration that represented the production process. Obviously, these two factors are utmost of importance when looking at requalification and potential changes that could impact the sterility assurance level. In summary, the regulatory interpretation is that annual review of IQ, OQ, PQ, and subsequent requalification activities are now a requirement of ISO 11135. The industry expectation is that a microbial PQ and a physical PQ be performed at least every 2 years to verify the paperwork review has captured any changes in the production or sterilization process. Additionally, reference load configuration using requalification must take into account the production changes that might have been made over the last year or 2 years to ensure that the reference load still represents the revised product or configuration. In this next portion of the presentation, we'll take a quick look at the initial validation of EO sterilization and what is required. We will look at high aspects of installation operational qualifications, microbial performance qualification, physical performance qualification, and chemical performance characterization. Chemical performance qualification. Before looking at the requalification process, it's important to understand what is required in a validated sterilization process in the first place. Sterilization, like any other validated process, follows the traditional V&V model. On the left-hand side, we have the planning user requirements. In this case, the user requirements is an SAL, and as well as the EO residual acceptance levels that must be met, functional specifications, design specifications, and system build down to the chamber and control systems. The installation qualification is typically the requirement or the responsibility of the contract sterilizer, as well as the operational qualification. It's not only until we get to the performance qualification that we actually look at what the manufacturer's responsibilities are. An overview of the initial qualification activities includes installation qualification and operational qualification. Installation qualification is the process of obtaining and documenting evidence that the equipment has been provided and installed in accordance with its specification. Operational qualification is the process of obtaining evidence that installed equipment operates within the predetermined limits used in accordance with operational procedures. One aspect of operational qualification is the empty chamber profile, which we'll discuss in more detail further on in this presentation. With regards to performance qualification, by definition, is the process of obtaining documented evidence that the equipment as installed and operated in accordance with operational procedures consistently performs in accordance with the predetermined criteria and thereby yields product meeting the required specification. ISO 11135 breaks down the performance qualification into 3 brackets: microbial performance qualification, physical, and chemical. The microbial portion, or microbial performance qualification, is your half cycles. In these half cycles, it demonstrates the capability of the process to deliver the sterility assurance level and confirm the effectiveness of the defined process for the product load combination in the production vessel. By BI, PCD, sterility is a requirement of this phase or this PQ. In the physical PQ phase, this phase demonstrates the specified acceptance criteria are met throughout the load for the duration of the process proposed time, and that the process is reproducible. Such factors as time, temperature, relative humidity, gas concentration, etc. are verified during this phase. The chemical PQ, as it's often referred to, demonstrates that the product EO gas residuals are within allowable limits upon completion of the process. With fundamentals of initial validation outlined, we now move into the heart of the presentation, the annual requalification assessment. In this section of the presentation, we will analyze the need for one of the following 3: documented rationale, reduced requalification, or full requalification. We start with the new guide in 11135 for annual review. This requalification decision tree, figure D1, can be found in the annex of 11135, Annex D. Outlined in the left-hand column are the various aspects of the product and process that should be evaluated for change. These are equipment, product, and processing history. The extent of requalification activities required is dependent on the changes in these categories that have taken place over the course of the year. If at the end of this data review no significant changes have been identified, and there has been a requalification within the last 2 years, a documented rationale or pen and paper study is acceptable. If there have been changes, or correction, if there have not been significant changes and the process has not been requalified within the last 2 years, a reduced requalification is required. And after the annual review of equipment, product, and process history, if significant changes have been identified, a full requalification may be required. Taking a deeper look at the various aspects of product and process that should be evaluated for change, we'll start with the 3 high-level categories of equipment, product, and process history. With regards to equipment, this is typically performed on the contract sterilizer side. The contract sterilizer should assess the changes and change history, calibration activities, and maintenance that has been performed on the equipment in the last year. On the manufacturer side, with regards to product changes, the design, any packaging, material, manufacturing process, bioburden, or load configuration changes should be evaluated. Additionally, an assessment of process history with regards to deviations and process failures should be analyzed. Equipment assessment identifies potential changes in, as we stated, equipment, calibration, and maintenance. With regard to the equipment, we are looking for changes such as chamber modifications and qualification activities resulting from those changes. Typically, a like-for-like component is installed, but if not, a substitute or a different model may be installed, and therefore additional qualification activities may be required. Additional change assessment of critical utilities such as water, steam, or air may be required as well. If the contract facility, for example, has expanded with regards to chambers, but has not expanded their critical utilities, this may put additional strain on those utilities, causing issues in the previously validated installed chambers. And last but not least, with regards to equipment, we do look at the interchamber profile temperature review to see if there's been a shift or a drift in the profile in the last year. Again, this falls under operational qualification. With regards to calibration, the main change control that we're looking for is verification of calibration activities and potential out-of-spec conditions that could impact the process. Anytime we look at out-of-spec conditions, we also want to look at the associated corrective actions, what was done for correction of the issue, as well as how was product or previous cycles dispositioned based on the out-of-spec condition. With regards to maintenance, we look at 2 aspects, preventive maintenance and unscheduled maintenance. Preventive maintenance should have a schedule, and it should be documented that the schedule was followed and met. Unscheduled maintenance, however, when things break, is when we need to take a little bit deeper look at associated corrective actions and the requalifications activities, much like we talked about in the equipment above. It is these unscheduled maintenance activities that really drive the assessment with regards to seeing what qualifications were performed on the equipment after it was corrected or replaced. Moving over to product assessment. Product assessment identifies potential changes in design, packaging, material, manufacturing processes, bioburden, and load configuration. Any one of these changes could impact the appropriateness of the BI or PCD configuration. A change in design with regards to physical size, geometry, or even material surface finishes could impact or change the resistance of the device, therefore in basically invalidating the BI PCD configuration. Packaging changes should be evaluated as well. An increase or decrease in packaging size or material should be evaluated. Again, this could change the influx, diffusion of gas into or out of the package, and therefore change the or challenge the appropriateness of the process challenge device. Material changes should be reviewed as well. Material changes with regards to properties, suppliers, etc. Manufacturing processes with regards to location, environment, or suppliers. Any change in one of these might lead to a change in bioburden enumeration and or potential bioburden resistance. Changes in bioburden resistance or enumeration, again, may invalidate the BI-PCD configuration. And lastly, load configuration, as we saw in our warning letter in the first section, load volume, density, loading presentation, and restraints, for example, are areas of change that we would need to evaluate to ensure that they do not impact these or challenge what was originally validated. A change in the production volumes, production materials, especially in a mixed load configuration, needs to be addressed as well. If it's a multi-product load or mixed load configuration, if the market increases in one product over another, those loading densities and volumes should be assessed as well. Moving into our last category of process history assessment, we look at process history and assess the evaluate deviations, process failures, and even the number of process loads. With regard to deviations, we're looking at cycle deviations and nonconformances. We trend this data to see if it is increasing or decreasing or remaining consistent. An increase in cycle deviations might require a full requalification based on changes within the equipment that may or may not have been captured in the previous evaluation. Process failures, such as unexplained positive biological indicator growth, should be evaluated as well. If growth cannot be explained, it may cause the need for additional requalification activities. And lastly, number of process loads. This refers to cycle count or order history. An increased number of cycles per month or even per quarter over what was originally expected might change bioburden as well as some other factors impacting the process. Upon completion of the change assessment, the decision tree is followed again to determine the requalification activities. As we stated earlier, any significant changes in the annual reviewed change history could lead to one of the three outcomes or requirements from the decision tree. Changes in equipment, product, or process, if significant, could lead to full requalification. No changes, or if the process was requalified in the last 2 years, could lead to a simple documentation or pen and paper study. With regard to the documented rationale, this would be the case in circumstances where no changes have been made to the product, packaging, equipment, service, etc. Therefore, a pen and paper is appropriate. It is recommended that a microbial PQ and physical PQ, including load temperature and humidity profiling, be performed at least every 2 years. This recommendation is to verify that the previous pen and paper study has captured all changes in the product or sterilization process. In the event that changes were identified or a reduced requalification has not been performed in the last 2 years, a reduced qualification could be required. Certain circumstances such as verifying continued appropriateness of the resistance of the internal PC PCD of the product, load to the resistance of the product bioburden, as well as to provide evidence that there has been no inadvertent change since the previous requalification study, and also to demonstrate a significant equipment change still provides the established SAL. And lastly, in some cases, to confirm product continues to meet allowable limits for EO residuals as specified in ISO 10993-7. A reduced requalification typically includes, at minimal, one fractional or half cycle exposure, including load, temperature, and humidity profiling. It is not uncommon to see firms perform a full cycle in addition to this minimum requirement. If the change assessment or reduced requalification demonstrates that the required SAL can no longer be achieved, then a new microbial performance qualification and physical performance qualification should be performed to reestablish the required SAL. Assessing change. If the change is just to adversely affect the effectiveness of the process, a full revalidation must be performed. This would consist of a minimum of 3 half cycles of the load configuration judged to be the most difficult. In the event there is growth when the requalification is performed, the cycle parameters may need to be adjusted to make the cycle more lethal. 3 half cycles need to be successfully performed and parameters demonstrate repeatability. If the requalification indicates that the sterilization process might no longer be capable of achieving the required SAL, the cause shall be investigated and corrective action or preventive action shall be taken. This is a new requirement within ISO 11135, and it is the expectation as part of the CAPA program within your facility. In summary, every year a formal requalification assessment is required to determine if changes have occurred that could adversely affect a previously validated process. The amount of requalification necessary depends on these changes and are deemed significant enough to affect the ability of the process to deliver a sterility assurance level of 10 to the minus 6. If the changes are minor, a reduced requalification can be performed. If the changes are significant, a full requalification would be required. A requalification half cycle must be performed every 2 years at minimum. During the off year, a documented rationale or pen and paper study covering all areas discussed may suffice if no changes have occurred. This concludes today's presentation on when to requalify an EO sterilization process. Thank you for your attendance. For further questions, feel free to contact me via email or phone.